about how often, like on any given day, you're asked to define yourself?
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
Right. You update a social media bio, or you introduce yourself at a networking event, or you fill out some profile online. And there's this heavy expectation to provide a fixed, permanent label. It's almost like carrying around a stack of business cards.
That's a great way to put it.
You hand one over and it says, director of marketing or devoted parent or political activist. And you basically point to it and say, well, there it is. That's me. That's my identity.
We really crave that kind of categorization, though. I mean, our brains are actually wired to seek out those clean, neat little boxes.
Because it's easier.
Exactly. It saves cognitive energy. If we can define ourselves and define the people around us in static terms, the world just feels incredibly safe and predictable. We desperately like things to be visible and easily defined.
But then, if you step into the world of ancient Jain philosophy specifically, we're looking at a translated discourse by Dr. Vivek-Sagar on this classical text known as the Yogsaar suddenly. That neatly printed business card just bursts into flames.
It really does. It completely dismantles how we're taught to build a legacy or find self-worth.
It's a totally different landscape of identity, and today's deep dive into this discourse transcript has a very specific mission.
Right. We are exploring this revolutionary concept from the text regarding where we actually place our ultimate loyalty.
Yeah.
The text argues that true spirituality and fundamentally true reality itself is what they call Vastuvadi.
Vastuvadi. Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
It means it is entirely substance-centric. It's focused on objective principles. And the really provocative part is that it leaves absolutely zero room for Vyaktivadi.
Which translates to person-centricism, right? Or like what we would call personality cults today.
Precisely. No room for personality cults at all.
For anyone listening right now, I mean, this might be the ultimate antidote to the modern influencer culture we are completely drowning in.
Oh, absolutely.
We live in this era defined by identity crises and just extreme fandoms.
Yeah.
If you've ever felt totally exhausted by constantly having to shift your life roles.
Or if you've ever caught yourself in a comment section, fiercely defending a public figure.
Yes, a celebrity, a politician, a thought leader, and you're defending them rather than their actual ideas.
Right.
This ancient philosophy offers a really deep psychological roadmap to mental stability.
Because the overarching goal of the Yogsaar text is about achieving a state of permanent inner peace.
Which sounds great.
It sounds amazing, but the text proposes that you can only achieve that peace by mastering a very specific and frankly very difficult psychological skill.
Which is?
Separating the eternal from the temporary. The core argument is that human beings suffer because we constantly anchor our happiness and our identities to things that are mathematically guaranteed to change.
Which brings us to this brilliant metaphor from the source material that explains the mechanics of that suffering.
The Ferris wheel.
Yeah, the Ferris wheel. To understand why we shouldn't attach our identities to other personalities or gurus, we first have to understand why we shouldn't even attach to our own temporary phases.
Right.
So imagine you're at a carnival, sitting in one of those swinging seats on a Ferris wheel.
Okay.
If you are on that ride, and you convince yourself that the view from the very top is your permanent reality.
You're going to suffer the moment the wheel inevitably rotates you back down to the bottom.
Exactly. You're going to get dizzy, sick, and eventually crash emotionally. You have to anchor yourself to the solid ground.
And the suffering there isn't caused by the wheel moving. I mean, the wheel is a machine. It's fundamentally supposed to move.
It's doing its job.
Right. The suffering is caused entirely by your false expectation that a moving seat was a permanent home.
That is such a crucial distinction.
In Jain philosophy, this ever-changing seat on the Ferris wheel of existence is called pariya. Yeah. Pariya refers to the modes, the phases, or the temporary states of our reality. So this includes your current physical body.
Okay.
It includes your daily emotional states. It even includes your shifting intellectual grasp of the world.
Wait, I would imagine that includes our spiritual progress, too. Because, we tend to treat our moments of enlightenment like permanent achievement.
Oh, totally. We treat them like trophies.
Right. Rather than just passing weather. Like, if I have a deeply profound meditation session, I want to label myself an enlightened person. But that feeling is just another moving seat, isn't it?
It is. And the text addresses that directly. Even your spiritual progress, those moments where you feel deeply connected or morally elevated, is temporary.
Wow.
In the text, they call these shifting spiritual stages gunasthana. Yes, they are entirely valid, they exist, and they're part of your journey, but they are constantly shifting. Relying on them for a permanent sense of self is a structural error.
So what are we supposed to rely on then?
What you need to anchor to is the dhruva, or the dravya.
Yeah.
This is the permanent, unchanging substance, the eternal soul.
The discourse uses the analogy of gold to clarify this, which I've found so helpful because abstract concepts like the eternal soul can be, well, really hard to visualize.
They are very abstract, yeah.
If I'm picturing a standard heavy gold bar sitting in a bank vault, that is the dravya. That is the permanent substance.
Right. Now, put a blowtorch to it. Melt that solid bar down and craft a delicate, ornate necklace.
Okay, I'm with you.
Wear it for a few years, then melt it down again and forge a thick, heavy bangle. The shape, the pariah, is constantly transforming.
But the underlying substance, the dravya, the gold itself, remains entirely unbothered by the blowtorch.
Exactly. Gold is always gold, regardless of the mold it's poured into.
We just get so incredibly attached to being the necklace.
We really do.
We invest all our emotional energy into the shape. We say, I am this impressive job title. I am this specific social status. I am this mood I'm feeling today.
Yeah, we identify with the shape completely.
And then when life brings the blowtorch and that shape inevitably melts down, like maybe we lose the job or our social standing shifts, we feel like we have been destroyed.
We grieve for the necklace and completely forget we're still the gold.
That cognitive blind spot is where all the pain lives.
It really is. The text explains that a wise person understands their current state. They know they're currently in a human body, they're aware of their current emotions and social roles.
But they never mistake that temporary state for their eternal self.
Exactly. They value the gold. So they remain at peace no matter what shape it temporarily takes.
Okay, but let me push back on this a little bit because there seems to be a very dangerous trapdoor here.
Oh, definitely. Let's hear it.
If the necklace is eventually going to melt anyway, why should I bother showing up to work?
Wait, the nihilism trap.
Yeah, like if everything temporary is just a passing phase on the Ferris wheel, why should I care about social traditions or being polite or participating in society? If I'm just the eternal gold, it sounds like the most logical response is to ignore all the rules, drop out of society entirely, and just go sit in a cave.
Well, the philosophy heavily anticipates that exact reaction. It's a very common misinterpretation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the text actually has a specific term for someone who falls into that trap. They call it a nishchayabashi.
Nishchayabashi.
You can translate that roughly as a fake absolutist. It describes someone who weaponizes ultimate spiritual truth as an excuse to be irresponsible, arrogant, or just dismissive in the physical world.
It reminds me of someone taking like a superficial physics class and saying, well, time is just a human construct and an illusion, so it doesn't matter that I showed up 3 hours late to your wedding and ruined the catering.
That is a perfect modern equivalent.
It's using a macro truth to justify micro bad behavior.
Exactly. It's a complete misunderstanding of how to navigate reality. To counter this, the text introduces the concept of vyavaharnaya.
Vyavaharnaya.
Right, which is the standpoint of practical behavior. The discourse makes it explicitly clear that a genuinely wise person, a samyak drishti, does not reject social traditions.
So they don't rebel against the mechanics of daily life.
No, not at all. They participate in them fully, but with a crucial internal boundary. They do it without making those traditions their core, eternal identity.
The source illustrates this beautifully with an anecdote about traveling between different villages.
I love that example.
The speaker in the transcript recounts observing different local customs. So in one village, the community might stand during a specific worship ritual. But in the next village over, the tradition is to sit down. In one place, lighting a ceremonial lamp is totally mandatory. In another, it's not part of the practice at all.
And if you are that fake absolutist we just talked about, you'd walk into the second village, see them sitting instead of standing, and you'd start a massive theological war.
Yeah. You'd be furious.
Right. You'd scream that the physical posture is just pariah, it's just a temporary illusion, and demand everyone conform to your idea of the absolute truth. You'd create complete chaos over the outer shell of a ritual.
But a samyak drishti, someone utilizing that vyavaharnaya, the practical behavior, just adapts.
They just adapt.
Think about the last time you, the listener, went to a wedding or a family gathering with customs completely different from your own. You didn't stand up and shout that their traditions were meaningless illusions.
You just participated.
Exactly. If the cultural custom for a marriage is taking 7 steps around a fire, you take the steps. That instinct you have to be polite and adaptable, the text frames that as a high-level spiritual skill.
It really is. You maintain your inner spiritual focus while entirely respecting the practical reality of the room you're standing in.
It is the ultimate art of balanced behavior.
You're preserving social harmony so that you actually have the mental space and the peace to do the real spiritual work internally. You aren't ignoring the world, but you aren't being consumed by it either.
But breaking free from this illusion of permanence isn't just about our own inner peace or how we act at weddings.
No.
It's a tactical advantage for how we view the rest of the world. Because if we can accept that our own physical forms and daily actions are just temporary phases, we have to apply that exact same logic to the people around us.
Including the people we admire the most.
Right. Which brings us to the core thesis of the discourse.
And this is where we transition from understanding the self to understanding our devotions. The text argues fiercely that true philosophy is Vastuvadi.
Meaning focused on substance and abstract principle.
Right. And because of that, it must actively reject Vyaktivadi, focusing on the individual.
We have to look at why human beings are so biologically and psychologically drawn to Vyaktivadi in the first place.
It's natural.
It is. Abstract principles are incredibly hard to hug.
Right.
They require mental heavy lifting. If I have to constantly analyze principles to figure out right from wrong, my brain gets tired. But if I can just find a charismatic hero, put them on a pedestal and say, whatever that person says is good,
You save a massive amount of cognitive energy.
Exactly. And we see this everywhere today.
We see it in politics, in the worship of tech billionaires,
Right.
in the intense devotion to lifestyle gurus. The psychological shortcut is deeply comforting.
But dangerous.
Very. The text warns that becoming attached to specific personalities or clinging to the sectarian labels those personalities create inevitably leads to mithyatva.
Which translates to false belief.
Yeah.
Yes, false belief.
Right.
Because you are building your entire worldview on a moving seat on the Ferris wheel.
Right. Individuals are, by definition, temporary. A person is a pariah. They are a changing phase.
They're flawed, they age, they make mistakes, they contradict themselves, and eventually they pass away.
So if your entire moral foundation is built on a human being, the moment that human being disappoints you, or simply disappears, your foundation completely crumbles. And beyond just the personal disappointment, focusing on the messenger rather than the message creates intense tribalism.
Oh, for sure.
When you focus on individuals, you inherently create borders. I'm a follower of this teacher and you are a follower of that teacher, therefore we are enemies.
Right.
The text points out how, historically, even within the same spiritual communities, certain groups got so caught up in the personality cult of a specific guru dev that they lost the plot completely.
Wow.
They became obsessed with honoring the man-building statues, promoting his specific name, fighting with rival factions.
To the point where they were distracted from the actual teachings.
Exactly. Distracted from the actual liberating teachings that Guru was trying to share in the first place.
The tragic irony of the personality cult is that the worship of the individual becomes the primary obstacle to the enlightenment they were pointing toward.
Perfectly said.
So, if we aren't devoting ourselves to the teacher, it sounds like we are just left devoting ourselves to a dry, dusty rulebook. But the text offers a third option. True devotion is directed toward Vitrakta.
Vitrakta is the living virtue of supreme detachment. It is the absolute absence of attachment and aversion.
Okay.
A truly wise practitioner doesn't get caught in a tribal argument saying, my historical guru is superior to yours. They revere the virtue that the guru managed to embody.
The source uses the examples of revered spiritual figures like Lord Mahavir or Lord Parshvanath, right?
Yes, a wise person is bowing to the supreme detachment and knowledge that both figures achieved. They're bowing to the goal, not the specific historical shape it took.
The source material illustrates the power of this principle-centric mindset by contrasting it with emotional impulsiveness. There's this really compelling metaphor in the discourse about how a balanced mind operates when faced with a massive obstacle. It looks back at the era of Indian independence to contrast impulsive, ego-driven fighters with the strategic patience of someone like Gandhi.
And it's important to note here, the text uses this purely as a psychological and strategic metaphor. It's not an endorsement of any specific political ideology.
Right, absolutely. We're just reporting what's in the text.
The observation is really about how a wise mind approaches conflict. The impulsive reaction, the emotional Vyaktivadi type of reaction, is to just grab a stick and run screaming at an opponent who has guns.
It's entirely driven by ego.
Right. The desire to be seen as a hero and just raw emotion.
It's reactive. And it usually ends in self-destruction without actually solving the problem.
Yeah.
The text argues that strategic patience, maintaining your composure, understanding the larger machinery at work, and systematically dismantling an obstacle without letting your own ego drive you into an unwinnable fight, that is the hallmark of a Samyak Drishti.
When you strip away the emotional worship of a leader, or the desire to be worshipped as the leader yourself, you stop being reactive.
You don't let the heat of the moment or the charisma of a loud personality pull you off your center.
Exactly. And to prove how deeply ingrained this anti-personality cult idea is within the tradition itself, the discourse examines the actual historical behavior of the greatest masters of this philosophy.
This part fascinated me.
It looks at Acharya Kunkund, who is universally recognized as one of the most profound scholars and spiritual masters in the Jain tradition. He wrote texts that have shaped the lives of millions over centuries.
It is entirely counterintuitive to how we are taught to build a legacy today. I mean, if anyone in history had the right or the leverage to build a massive personal brand, it was this guy.
Oh, without a doubt.
If you write a foundational masterpiece today, you put your face on the cover, you go on a speaking tour, and you trademark your frameworks.
But when you examine his foundational works, he does the exact opposite.
Yeah.
He explicitly states that the teachings are not his own.
Really?
Yeah. He refuses to take personal credit for the brilliant frameworks he's writing down. Instead, he credits the Kavali, the omniscient ones who preceded him. He completely removes his own ego and his own identity from the transmission of knowledge.
And then his direct disciple, Umaswami, takes it even further. Umaswami writes an absolute masterwork, which is essentially the grand systematization of the philosophy.
Right.
In the modern corporate or academic world, if you are the star pupil of a legend, what do you do in the foreword of your book? You name drop.
Of course you do.
You write a glowing 10-page dedication about how amazing your mentor was, cementing your lineage, proving your proximity to power, building your network.
It's the standard mechanism for gaining authority. But Umaswami actively refuses to do that. The text highlights that he doesn't start his masterwork with a glowing ode to Kunkund's personality.
So what does he do?
He starts by praising the supreme virtues. He praises Vitragta. He acts with the exact same ego death as his teacher.
Why did they do that, though? It feels like more than just being humble. It feels incredibly calculated.
It was highly calculated. It wasn't false modesty. It was a deliberate, sophisticated safeguard.
Safeguard.
Yeah. By actively removing their own personal identities and refusing to become objects of worship, Kunkund and Umaswami built a structural firewall into the philosophy.
Oh, wow.
They protected the entire belief system from decaying into a dictatorship of personality.
They made it structurally impossible for people to just blindly worship them as men because they kept pointing the camera away from themselves and back toward the universe.
Exactly. They proved through their actions that the center of the religion is the objective truth of reality, the mechanics of the soul, the elements of existence.
Not the human being who happened to be holding the pen.
Right. It represents the highest form of spiritual integrity. If the message is truly universal, the messenger has a duty to get out of the way.
That is powerful.
It is the fundamental difference between a teacher who wants to collect blind followers and a teacher who wants to create liberated equals.
What a profound journey this discourse takes us on. We started at the carnival, spinning on the Ferris wheel, realizing how much suffering we cause ourselves by tying our happiness to the moving seats, our temporary phases, our changing moods, our pariah.
And we uncovered that to find genuine stability, we have to look past the shape of the jewelry and focus on the gold. We must anchor to the permanent substance, the dravya.
But we also learned the critical importance of vyavaharnaya, the art of balanced behavior. We can't use ultimate spiritual truth as an excuse to be arrogant in the real world.
Right. We have to respect our social roles and local traditions, participating in the physical world without tying our eternal identity to those passing customs.
And that profound balance gave us the tools to dismantle the ultimate trap, the personality cult. True wisdom requires us to seek the virtue, the vitragta, not the guru.
It demands that we remain vastuvadi, entirely principle-centric, and reject the tribalism of being person-centric.
So, as you go about your day-to-day, you don't need to be an ancient scholar to apply this framework. The next time you find yourself scrolling through a heated comment section on social media, or sitting in a tense meeting at work, fiercely defending a thought leader, a politician, or even fiercely defending your own job title.
Take a breath.
Exactly. Step back and ask yourself, Am I attached to the permanent principle here, or am I just fighting for a temporary personality?
It is an incredibly clarifying filter for how we spend our limited emotional energy, and it leaves you with a profound question to explore on your own.
If every single label you hold right now, your name, your career, your social status, your political affiliations, your deeply held spiritual moods, and even your absolute favorite heroes, if all of those temporary shapes were entirely stripped away tomorrow,
What is the gold underneath that remains entirely unchanged?
take some time to sit with that silence.